The NFL championship weekend is fast approaching. We have 4 teams squaring off, all of which are incredibly talented. I'm excited for the next few rounds of NFL football, but I want to talk about the previous rounds. I haven't gotten on this platform to talk about each of the games in the conference semifinals and really the wild card round. So let's do that today in this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. Without further ado, let's get into it. First of all, I wanted to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Your support means a lot. If you're listening on any podcast platform, I want to let you know we're also on YouTube, so you can subscribe to us over there. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're also available on any audio platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, we're available. And so go over there, check that out. If you are listening, rate us 5 stars on wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications as well by clicking the little bell next to the subscribe button. It really helps us out a lot. And you'll get notified whenever we release a new video. So I think that's pretty great. If you're looking for more of our content, the social links are in the description of this podcast, or this YouTube video, but it's at Lots of Thoughts Sports on Instagram, same on TikTok, at LOT Sports Pod on Twitter, and you can find us all of this on the website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. You can access the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, the YouTube, the podcast, the merchandise, the LinkedIn, the Facebook, whatever your jam is. That's all available, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. It's been a little while, and as I explained in the last episode, I'm doing a little bit of traveling, right, back and forth between a few different locations. So as you can see, I'm back to my old setup. If you're watching on YouTube, it's my more comfortable setup. I have my 3 monitors here with my microphone and headset instead of just carrying around a MacBook with said microphone and headset. So it's a little more comfortable here, but hopefully the audio quality is the same either way. I hope that's the case. Obviously, the video is going to be a little bit different, but I didn't get to talk about the first round of the playoffs on this podcast, so I wanted to do that. I did cover them a little bit. If you're subscribed on YouTube or you're following on Instagram, I made, or TikTok, either way, I made shorts, reels, TikTok videos, whatever you want to classify them as, reposted on all 3 platforms that were about the wild card round, but I didn't go in depth about each game, and I want to do that here. The Seahawks and the 49ers kind of ran away with this game, and I expected it to be close because I thought the weather was going to play a big factor, and it just didn't. The 49ers were the better team. The Seahawks had a great season. Geno Smith had a great season, and even though he didn't, cover himself in glory in this game, it was one of those situations where he still performed better than expected this year. So, you don't take anything away from him, but the 49ers are a juggernaut, and we'll talk about them moving forward. The Chargers and the Jaguars, one of the biggest choke jobs honestly in NFL history, in my opinion. Chargers came out, were they leading 24-0 or 27-0? It was ridiculous. 27-0, I think, was the actual number. And they ended up giving the game away to the Jaguars. Now, there's one thing with the Chargers is I think Brandon Staley probably should have been fired after that game. I don't like to call for anyone's job, but he was already showing signs of not being a great coach, and I thought that was a move they were going to make, as I mentioned on other platforms, and they haven't so far. They fired their offensive coordinator. I don't think they're firing Brandon Staley, but that was a rough performance from him as a coach, and anytime you have a blown lead, it's going to look bad on the head coach. You saw that with Dan Quinn and the Atlanta Falcons years ago, and, we know now that I think Dan Quinn was not the best head coach, and he hired well, and that carried him throughout basically his career in Atlanta. Obviously, with Kyle Shanahan from the aforementioned 49ers being his offensive coordinator, I think that helped a whole lot. But I think what this shows also for the Jaguars is that Doug Peterson is an incredible head coach. And, he had his run in Philadelphia. They won a Super Bowl, and it was time for them to move on, and they're in better hands now, I think, in my opinion. And Sirianni is a better fit for the offensive running now with Jalen Hurts. I think he's a better mind for that team. But Doug Peterson came in and changed that Jaguars culture immediately. And it couldn't have been worse, really. Urban Meyer was awful with Jacksonville with numerous scandals. But you see someone who came in And the Jaguars didn't have a great season. They had a good season, but they saw development from key young pieces. And you see someone come in like Doug Peterson, who takes the helm, who establishes the culture, gets the best out of everyone on that team. And that's exactly what they're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars run away with the division next year, because I never believe in the Titans, given their structure in the modern NFL and its move toward having a dynamic quarterback being the key to success and key to winning. And then, you have the other two teams, Houston and Indianapolis, can't get out of their own way. Especially with Houston can't even secure the number 1 pick successfully. How do you expect them to contend for a division? But in all seriousness, the Jaguars are going to run away with that division next year. I'd like to see a better record than 9-8. I'd like to see Trevor Lawrence start out really well to show that his development is continuing on a linear path rather than something that's a little more up and down. But it was a great game for them, and they got eliminated in the next round, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But you really saw the culture change just in that game, and that Doug Peterson calmed them, had them ready to go, and came back and won that game. And you can't say enough about that. Next up, the Bills and the Dolphins. This probably should have been a warning that the Bills weren't ready to compete. They struggled with the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. And, also a big comeback in that game as well. A lot of high octane offense. Ended up being 34-31 final score. Bills pulled it out. But at the end of the day, maybe this would have been a Dolphins win if Tua was there. But with Skylar Thompson, the Dolphins performed pretty well. And that's all you can really say about them. Hopefully Tua stays healthy next year if he's even going to play. I mean, there's part of me that hopes as a human being, not as a football fan, but as a human being, that hopes that he takes the step back and weighs his options of retirement, because 3 concussions in 1 year is a terrifying prospect. But if he is back next year, hopefully he can stay healthy for the Dolphins' success. I mean, me as a Jets fan, I don't want Dolphins' success necessarily, but as a person, hopefully he can stay healthy. And the Dolphins hope that that's the case too, assuming he's going to be the day 1 starter. Next up, we had the Giants and the Vikings. The Giants pulled this one out, and, we talked about head coaching, and Brian Daboll, man, has that team ready to go. And they don't have the most talent in the world, right? Daniel Jones is not the best quarterback. He's a okay to good quarterback. Saquon Barkley is an incredible offensive player, but outside of a few offensive linemen, their offense isn't dynamic, right? Sterling Shepard got hurt, and you had guys like Richie James and others trying to make impacts that weren't completely effective. Not anything to them, but it's just they're so far down on the depth chart, on top of being a team that wasn't expected to do much with their talent. You're missing guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, and they traded away Kadarius Toney, and guys like Kenny Golladay are getting paid large amounts of money to make blocks and not have a great offensive impact. Listen, Daniel Jones ran for 78 yards. He threw for several touchdowns. He played very well. Threw for 2 touchdowns, and I believe he ran one in as well, if I'm not mistaken. The team as a whole played really well. And the Vikings, 13-4, probably didn't deserve to be 13-4. Their point differential was in the negative, and that's some indication often of a team that has made good coaching decisions toward the end of games, but hasn't shown the most talent and the most ability throughout the season. And that's what they were. And they went in, and Brian Daboll is a better head coach than what's his name from the Vikings. I'm going to have to click on it because I can't remember his name scrolling through the ESPN page. I'll just have to Google it. I'm blanking on his name. They just hired him. Kevin O'Connell. That's right. Former backup quarterback of the Jets, by the way, but that's besides the point. Brian Daboll's a better coach than Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell's a good coach, but I think Brian Daboll did what he needed to do to win, and Daniel Jones did what he needed to do to win, and Saquon Barkley, although limited touches, did what he needed to do to win, and that defense stepped up when it mattered most, and they ended up getting the win against the Vikings. Hell of a season from the Giants, even if we'll talk about an embarrassing moment next round. Ravens and the Bengals, another game that was closer than it should have been, right? If it weren't for a Tyler Huntley goal line fumble that was returned 98 yards for a touchdown by a defensive lineman for the Bengals, this game probably would have gone the Ravens' way. And considering the quarterback difference between Tyler Huntley and Joe Burrow, that's surprising. Now, the Ravens were a very good team this year when Lamar was healthy, and they ended up as a good team with Tyler Huntley, or an okay team, better than average, but still not great. And That's what happens when you have a former MVP quarterback that gets hurt, right? And Tyler Huntley did a great job in this game, and they ended up keeping it close. The Bengals defense really performed well against really a dynamic Bengals offense, but the Bengals ended up being too much, and the Ravens couldn't get a touchdown late when it mattered. I question John Harbaugh's time management a little bit, but that's a conversation for another day, I suppose. And then you had the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers were the worst team in the playoffs, and that showed, right? They were 8-9. They came in and they got their butts whipped early. It really could have been way worse than it was, and it was a 17-point blowout. The Cowboys are a very good team, and we'll talk about more in the next round, obviously. But the Buccaneers were not. And Tom Brady, maybe he goes somewhere where he can perform better with the weapons around him. But I think the coaching drop off is one big thing from Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles. Love Todd Bowles as a person, but as a coach, he's not good. He's not a great head coach. And you saw that drop off. And Bruce Arians, meanwhile, is probably a Hall of Fame head coach, if I do say so myself. Overall, the Bucs didn't have the talent to get there, and you can't shame Tom Brady for that. You can't necessarily shame Todd Bowles for that, although he showed to have some issues. You can't blame any one player for that, but they were just a team that had a run. They won a Super Bowl. That's great. It's time for everyone to move on. And Tom Brady's going to move on, whether that's to retirement or whether that's to another team, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the off season. I'm not so sure, but it's definitely away from Tampa. Kudos to them for winning their division, albeit in a very disappointing manner because that division was awful. Then we had the next round, several games that I thought were going to be better than they were, in my opinion. So first, we had the Jaguars and the Chiefs, and the Chiefs kind of stayed ahead early, and the Jaguars, blew it. Trevor Lawrence, I think, was a little bit overwhelmed throughout the whole playoffs. That was shown by his 4 interceptions early in the first game against the Chargers, and he looked a little overwhelmed in this one as well. His quote, he had a quote, something to the nature of, when asked about how loud Arrowhead Stadium would be, something to the nature of, I can't imagine it'll be louder than Jacksonville was last week. And that's ridiculous. The Chiefs' home stadium is incredible. Their noise levels are record breaking. Jacksonville is one of those teams that the NFL has certainly thought about moving if they're going to establish expansion in Europe, which I want to talk about as a full podcast episode. So I'm going to try not to get sidetracked into that. Listen, the Chiefs were the better team, 14-3. They had a great season. And Trevor Lawrence is still developing. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are still developing. It was great for them to get this far, for them to come back and win that division against the Titans, who had a lead through a large part of the season, although that was more the Titans choking it away than it was the Jaguars taking it away. But nonetheless, you didn't expect them to win this game. I didn't really expect it to be close. It was closer than I thought because of a couple late scores, but good on Jacksonville for a good season. Don't blame them for losing this game. The Chiefs are just one of those incredible teams, and they're my pick to win the Super Bowl. So obviously I had them winning this game. The Giants and the Eagles, man, I thought there was a chance the Giants could keep this close, but there was also a chance the Giants would get blown out. And the Eagles just have too much talent all the way around for it to be too close. And we saw that, right? The Giants looked good against Minnesota, a team that didn't have that much talent, that wasn't ready to win now, in my opinion. Not that they're ready to win in the future, but the Eagles are ready to win right now, ready to win the Super Bowl right now. And the Giants are just not that. They're in year one of a rebuild. I'd like to say it was a successful season, but this game will definitely leave a poor taste in the Giants fans' mouth too, especially with it being to the Eagles, a division rival. This loss so devastating in such a way, but it was still a good season for them. 9-7-1 in the first year of Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen leading the charge. We'll see what they do, and now that they can add players of their own. And the Eagles are uber talented. I'll give a little preview of the next round, but I love watching them, man. Jalen Hurts has impressed me thoroughly. But moving on, Bengals and Bills, talking about games that I thought would be closer. This was, I would have taken Buffalo in this game had I had the option, right? Not Buffalo, I'm sorry. I would have taken Cincinnati in this game had I had the option, but I never would have anticipated it looking this ugly for Buffalo. And like I said, with the game versus Miami, maybe that should have been a sign when they really couldn't fully get it going. But Josh Allen doesn't look the same. He doesn't, man. He had an interception in this game. He was 25 of 42, which is not a bad completion percentage, but it's not great. 265 yards. Bengals defense was good. He only put up 10 points. The offense did in total. Something's not right in Buffalo. I'm just going to say it that way. And Josh Allen doesn't look right. And I talked about this on an Instagram video, which was reposted everywhere. You might have seen it on a short on YouTube. Please ignore that voice crack just a second ago. But there's two things that I think could be wrong with the Buffalo Bills offense. Number one, I think Josh Allen may still be hurt. There was a game against the Jets, and I should look this up while I have my computer in front of me. There's a game against the Jets, the first one, where the Jets won 20-12. That was week, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I thought it was around week 10. That's surprising. So week 5. No, this can't be. I'm working backwards. I'm sorry. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Man, I don't know. This is not too clear of a layout. ESPN, fix your website. I apologize to anyone listening on an audio platform or on a video platform, because this is not great. Okay, I see. So the Jets. So this is week. Boy, this is confusing. They lost to the Jets 20-17. I can tell you that. And it was a game where Zach Wilson had an underwhelming stat line, but they got the win. And that's why I remember. This was week, it looks like week 9, because the Jets are 6-3 after this game, and Buffalo is 6-2, and Buffalo already had their bye. So week 9. So I was 1 week off. It was a week where the Jets and the Bills played, and there was a late hit, not a late hit in terms of a late hit, like an illegal after the ball was gone, but it was late in the game, and the Bills were trying to come back, and Josh Allen got tackled. I forget who made the tackle. Maybe it was Quinnen Williams, or it might have been Michael Clemens. I'm not sure. But it had guy hit him in the arm, and Josh Allen was kind of flexing his arm and flexing his hand and replicating his throwing motion, standing there, clearly hurt. And there's thought to whether he would come out of the game, but it was only a few plays left, and he let off a 70-yard bomb the next throw. So, clearly everyone thought he was fine. But I suspect that still may be bothering him. And we'll find out as we get to the offseason. But if it's something like that lingers, and you play through it, and you're able to play through it because it's a pain tolerance thing, and the backup quarterback's not going to be able to win you a Super Bowl, and you feel like this is the year, then maybe you play through it and your accuracy is diminished. Your deep ball accuracy especially is diminished. And you don't look like the same quarterback. You make dumb mistakes because you're thinking too much about your pain level. And that could be the case for Josh Allen. The second thing that I think could be the case is I talked about Brian Daboll for the Giants and the work he's done with Daniel Jones, right? Turned him into a good quarterback. I could say that, a good quarterback this year. And, he didn't have crazy stats, but he led the offense well. He is a dynamic runner, especially for someone who really didn't have that profile coming into the league. He's shown to have really good speed at the position. And he's been much more accurate this year. He's limited the fumbles. He's limited the interceptions. He's been a better quarterback this year in the offense, and the team has looked much better. And Brian Daboll is regarded as quarterback whisperer in that way, right? He turned Josh Allen into a guy that had accuracy issues in college. And, that was a big thing for him coming out of Wyoming. And he took him, the team took him early in the draft, and they established him as a really good quarterback, and they improved his accuracy. And now he's one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the league. And so then he moves on to New York, and he had some previous experience as well, but I'm not going to talk about that in this podcast episode. He moves on to New York, and he turns a guy who was not given the 5th-year option just last offseason in Daniel Jones, and turns him into a respectable NFL quarterback, right? It improves his accuracy, improves his confidence. And so you look back at the team that he left, the Buffalo Bills, where he was the offensive coordinator, and they don't look the same. Their offense doesn't look the same. And Sean McDermott, right, is their head coach. I don't doubt his ability to orchestrate an offense and hire a new offensive coordinator. But Brian Daboll has been shown to be an incredible coach as he's moved on to the Giants. He's going to win Coach of the Year. And you can't help but wonder what losing a guy like that in the room does for a quarterback and does for an offense. Maybe it's confidence. Maybe it's slight, mechanical things that improve Josh Allen's ability to read the field. I'm not sure what it is, but maybe that loss is bigger than we think it is. And that's what could be limiting the Bills in this game. But the Bengals nonetheless pull off an impressive victory. They look like they're firing on all cylinders, and we'll talk about that with the preview of the championship game. And lastly, the Niners and the Cowboys. What a boring game. I'm sorry. And I know Brock Purdy played relatively well given the overall offensive production, but I don't know. I don't really want to talk about this. The Cowboys flamed out. Dak Prescott looked awful. And there were a lot of doubters coming into the playoffs because he had a bad game the last week against Washington, was it? Yes, against Washington. And, he proved them wrong last week against Tampa. And he proved those doubters right this week against the 49ers. And the 49ers have an incredible defense. And they're very talented, but you got to expect more from a guy you're paying so much money to lead one of the best teams in football. At least I thought one of the top 5 to 6 teams in football. And he didn't do that. So the 49ers squeak away with a win. Okay, now into the preview of the next round. Conference championship. Listen, we have the 49ers and the Eagles. And these are both very, very talented teams, right? You look at Philly's offense, powered by Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And you look at the 49ers offense, powered by all the weapons, Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. And both teams have incredible defenses all the way up and down the board. But in these games, and I've alluded to this, in these games, I trust the quarterback. Which quarterback is going to make winning plays? That's what I always come down to. And if the teams are relatively close, which they are, I believe, let me see, Philadelphia is a 2.5-point favorite at home. So on a neutral field, essentially the way Vegas does this is a 3-point benefit to either side for a home game. That's the way generally it is. Sometimes it's 3.5, depending on how dynamic the location is. But that's generally the concept. So if you take away 3 from that line, that would mean they believe the 49ers are a 0.5-point favorite on a neutral site over the Eagles. And I think that's fair. But it's basically a pick 'em at that point. It's basically they think these teams are relatively equal, but the stadium leans toward the Eagles. And I think the quarterback play leans toward the Eagles. Listen, Brock Purdy has been an incredible story. And if he wins this game and goes to the Super Bowl, he is the next 49ers franchise quarterback. And I'm making that claim here. I'm staking that claim here. Trey Lance will not start week 1 if Brock Purdy wins this game. Trey Lance will not start next year unless Brock Purdy is hurt if Brock Purdy wins this game. If he shows out, he deserves to be the guy. Obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo is gone, and they gave him a lot for Trey Lance, but Brock Purdy has not lost a game. And if he takes them to the Super Bowl, even if he doesn't win it, he deserves to be the guy next year. They deserve the 49ers to need to start him, and they'll keep Trey Lance on the roster, but they won't sign a veteran. They won't re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo. They'll have those two as their quarterbacks and Trey Lance as the backup. But Brock Purdy has looked good. He hasn't looked great, in my opinion. He's made some throws that were they're a little scary, so, including some where he led the receiver into the defender. Some that show that he still does need polishing. But his success does not come out of nowhere. I want you to know that. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt early this year, right? Trey Lance got hurt even earlier this year. So when Trey Lance got hurt, they have Jimmy Garoppolo, they have Brock Purdy. Those are the 2 quarterbacks on the roster. 49ers could have signed a veteran to back up Jimmy Garoppolo. And considering how often Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured, that would have been a smart move if they didn't believe in Brock Purdy. Because you want a veteran guy ready to go that could take over this team. This is a Super Bowl caliber team, Super Bowl winning caliber team. You want a veteran guy that can lead the offense and hopefully, pull a Nick Foles and perform well in the playoffs. But they saw Brock Purdy improving, and that's why it doesn't come out of nowhere, because they were confident enough to keep Brock Purdy as the backup quarterback to a guy that's always hurt. And I love Jimmy Garoppolo as a game managing quarterback, and that's as far as I'll go. He's good enough to make your team really good and not good enough to make your team great. But Brock Purdy showed some signs early on to that coaching staff that they could believe in him. And now that Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt, Brock Purdy took it over. Jimmy G was gone anyway after this year, in my opinion. But, he's certainly been a revelation in San Francisco, and he's beloved. But I'm taking the Eagles if I have to pick because I believe in Jalen Hurts more than him. And, maybe he'll prove me wrong. I'm not sure. And then the Bengals and the Chiefs. In my opinion, the Chiefs are the best team in football. They have the best quarterback in football. They have the best coach outside of Bill Belichick in football. And I'm not so sure Bill Belichick's still up at the top level like he was just a few years ago. But They have the best offensive mind at the very least in football in Andy Reid. And they've got great weapons in Kansas City. They've got a very good defense, and the quarterback's going to make plays when it matters most. Now, Cincinnati's a point favorite in Kansas City, which means they believe Kansas City is 4 points worse than Cincinnati on a neutral field. I don't buy that. I mean, Cincinnati's a very, very, very good team, a very good defense, incredible offensive weapons. I mean, Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and Joe Burrow has clearly taken a step up. He's kind of put himself in this upper echelon of quarterbacks to the point where I think he might be second or third best in the NFL. But Patrick Mahomes is the best. And it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a close game. The Bengals have had the Chiefs numbered as of history, but I can't doubt Patrick Mahomes. And it comes back to bite me in the butt quite often. But I can't pick against him. And so that's why I picked the Chiefs. But I'm so excited for this game. I think it's going to be a very good one. I think that'll do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the wild card summary, the conference semifinal summary, the conference championship preview, and an overall football conversation. There's going to be more football related content in the off season. I'm going to bring back the series of predicting all 32 starting NFL quarterbacks in the next year. So look out for that episode in the coming months. We're going to have more coverage of the Super Bowl and the conference championship games as they happen. Shout out to the Pro Bowl and the NFL, by the way, for getting rid of the Pro Bowl, replacing it with Pro Bowl games. That makes me very happy. It's something that should have been done a long time ago because no one cared about the Pro Bowl. But stay tuned for all that content. If you're interested in more of our content, find us via the links in the description on any social platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the like button. You're listening on a podcast app, rate us 5 stars. I really appreciate the support. Thank you very much for enjoying the content and watching until this point. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.